I'll write it down.
I'm ready.
Oh, you got
I
it.
got it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't see, it's just, by the way,
Yours is right. This is the leftover.
the left.
Did you ask for 20?
I did.
I handed them out.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And then that was what was left over.
Thank you very much. Oh, I left something in my drawer.
Is that our friend in the audience? Yes, it is. Mr. Sullivan, right? Huh? That's not good. Does Richard know? Oh, okay, hold on. Oh, God. Oh, sorry. Richard?
Hey, guys. Some people do anything to make friends.
Oh, I need to get my cord. I'll be right back.
So how did you know where that heard from him? He was supposed to send me. Not at this moment, but soon, yes.
Oh, yay. Okay, please. Gavin, in your speech, are you going to mention Stanton Center, the frigid temperature, because they're there? Yeah, and I'll clap or something. Nicole, I don't know. Yeah. Right, right. Yeah. I was gonna close it after today, the close.
The regular meeting of the Annapolis City Council on Monday, February 11th, 2019 is called to order at 7:03. At this time, would everyone willing and able please stand for the invocation given by Alderman Henson, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
If I may lead us in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever. Amen.
Mr. City Attorney, please present the first item on the agenda.
The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
I gotta call the
Unless you'd like to call the roll.
Mayor Buckley,
Here.
Alderwoman Tierney. Here. Alderman Payone. Here. Alderwoman Pendell Charles. Here. Alderman Finlayson. Present. Alderman Rodriguez. Alderman Henson. Present. Alderman Savage.
Present.
Alderman Arnett.
Present.
All right, now, Mr. City Attorney, thank you.
All right. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Arnett.
I'll move we approve, but I'd like to amend the agenda.
Okay.
I'd like to drop this proposed motion to postpone 08-18.
It's not a motion yet. Hold on. It's not a motion yet. It's just listed that way. You didn't vote on it. It's not.
I know,
it's
but
just
why
listed.
is it even in there?
Because Alderman Savage requested it.
You asked him?
There was a communication error.
Already I'm confused.
You have to vote to postpone it when you get to it, or vote to move it.
Is it in the agenda now? Can we amend the agenda?
There's
to
a
take it
note
out?
on the agenda. It's not an action. It's a note because he requested that we add to the agenda that this was going to be postponed until a date certain.
So, Alderman Savage can give some clarification.
My intention was just to have it appear on the agenda for either a vote or postponement.
Okay. So, that's going to come up. So, can we get a second to approve the agenda? Or not?
Second.
Okay. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion passes. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is petitions, reports, and communications, beginning with the Audit Committee's quarterly report.
Anybody like to do a report?
Yes, just a moment, please, Mr. Mayor.
You guys were here nice and early this morning, I saw.
Is he putting a costume on?
Alderman
gonna make it official, huh?
Good evening, everyone. Mr. Mayor, for those tuning in at home, my name is Alderman Fred Payon. I'm the alderman from Ward 2. One of my duties as an alderman is to chair the brand spanking new audit committee that was voted on and approved late last spring. To my right is former alderman, former star alderman, I might add, Gerald Littman, from Ward 5. He is one of the civilian members of the committee. The committee is made up of 7 individuals. There are 3 of us on the council. I am chairing it. Alderwoman Pendell Charles from Ward 3 and Alderwoman Shanika Hinson from Ward 6 are also the council representatives. There are 4 civilians. One, Julie Mussog, Jared Littman, to my right, Mr. Albert Kirchner, and James Cardillo. All of the civilian representatives, there are also two non-voting members, our city manager, Teresa Sutherland, and our city finance director, Jody Dickinson, both of whom are here tonight. We had our first meeting back in July. As you can imagine, the first meeting was taken up almost exclusively with getting organized. We've never done this sort of thing here in the city before, and it's no mean feat getting a brand spanking new committee going. The purpose of the audit committee is spelled out quite clearly in the code. It's our duty to retain and oversee work of any external independent auditors engaged for purpose of preparing or issuing an independent audit report or performing other independent audits, reviews, or attest services. We kind of oversee the overseers, if you will. Among many other things. We do have a number of other duties, and we are authorized to do a number of other things, which I think we intend to do, quite frankly, as chairman of this, once we get organized completely, and once we have things running smoothly. I think my job, more than anything, is to stay out of the way of our 4 civilians, because we have an extraordinarily qualified group of people with auditing and accounting experience in this group. Every one of them has an extensive background in this. And let me tell you, they regularly dig into things and have questions about things that, frankly, I don't think most people on this council this evening would have any thoughts about or know the first thing about how to do. I'm very comfortable in saying that I need to step back and stay out of the way at times, and I fully intend to do that while leading at the same time, leading the direction at least. The July meeting, and first of all, I will have for you. I had thought I'd have a couple more minutes than this before I'd be called on this evening, and I was going to hand out the annual report that was submitted by the finance department for our particular committee. It goes over in detail our meeting dates, who was present. Yes, I got it. My 3 colleagues on this side, I miss the mayor and you folks, but I'll give it to you just as soon as I'm finished here. Frankly, there's probably more in here than I could give you this evening in the way of an oral report, but I'm nevertheless going to give you a brief oral report anyway. We have spent our time we've met, let's see, we met this morning most recently, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 meetings. We have not, my efforts aside, we have not been able to finish the meetings a minute early on any occasion, not because people like to talk, but because the issues we have run very deep, I think, here in the city, and we are trying to correct some things that need to be corrected, ultimately saving the taxpayers money by streamlining procedures, finding ways that we can ensure that cash is collected in a safe and responsible manner, and also finding better ways, just plain better ways of doing things. Now, it is not an overnight, it's not an issue that's going to be solved overnight. It's a marathon, not a sprint. We have money limitations. We have, well, we have to follow procedures of our purchasing department when we go to hire an auditor. There are a number of things that have slowed us down. I mean, I think many of us have a little bit of William Donald Schaefer in us, that we want it done and we want it done now. But unfortunately, we're, you know, not unfortunately, but sometimes you just have to be a little patient. We have, at the present time, we issued an RFP a couple of months ago for accounting services, auditing services with regard to a particular department. We had to go through that process, the same as any other process for the city. And we are in the process of choosing one of these individuals. The first department that we will be going through is Recreation and Parks. This is not intended as a gotcha type of situation. We want to assist them. We want to make sure they're doing, we clearly want to make sure they're doing things right and doing things in a most expeditious and financially responsible way. But you know, we're not really looking to dig up dirt. If we find dirt, fine, but, well, not fine, but we intend to correct it. We will be, of course, reporting any findings we have back to the council as a whole. The selection of Recreation and Parks was deemed appropriate for a number of reasons. They handle a lot of cash there. That's probably primary, but they also, you know, I think may need some assistance. I want to emphasize may need some assistance with some of the procedures they follow. That was selected after a robust discussion on our part. We do not intend to stop there. At some point, we'd like to do this with almost every department, if not every department in the city. It's not cheap, and money is limited. Mr. Mayor, I will be having some discussions with you before you propose your budget, I can assure you, regarding, you know, how much money we might be able to have, and we think we can easily save the city more than whatever it is that you can give us. We also have decided to establish a fraud, waste, and abuse hotline here for employees to report what they think are, you know, maybe abuses in the system. Other jurisdictions do this. The county has such a hotline. It has, well, we've all but completed the process of setting it up. What I understand, the city manager will be sending out a flyer to every department, or maybe even every employee. I don't remember how they'll be notified, but with instructions telling them what this is, what in general terms can be reported, giving them a number to follow, and you know, what the procedure is. We hope that will be a very inactive line, but if somebody does have something to report, we'd like to think that they will be able to use this safely without any retribution whatsoever. to them as a result of reporting anything. I mean, there are things that employees know, face it, that people on the outside don't know, and it just seemed like a good and logical idea. We've also received reports from the city auditing firm, Clifton Larson Allen. We've had, again, a rather robust discussion about the DROP program and the fiscal impact, and a report about how we've changed that, hopefully, so that it is fiscally neutral. It was supposed to be fiscally neutral from day one. That didn't exactly happen, as some of us feared. But I think we're on the right track now. Our city manager and finance director hopefully have gotten us there. We have also discussed this morning the CAFR report that we received this week. It was not as detailed a discussion as I hope to have next month. We just got the thing. And really, it's 134 pages long, and hey, we're good, but maybe not that good. We just needed a little bit more time to go through it, but we did make some pretty good preliminary observations, and it seems that things are basically in pretty good shape, and as they should be, as we would expect them to be. Well, I really, that's basically my oral report. I'm required by law to follow this up with a written report, and to tell you the truth, this is going to be a good part of it when you get it. It outlines who's been at what meetings, votes and outcomes at every single meeting date we've had, but I'm going to certainly add to this, at least in small part. Mr. Lippman, would you like to add anything?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mayor, council members, always good to see you. I'll try to keep my my comments brief for you. First of all, I wanted to share that I felt like all of the meetings that we have had have been extremely robust. I think you'd all be proud and impressed that the committee has had very hearty discussions, different viewpoints, and I commend our chair for being able to foster a healthy amount of discussion and collaboration and exchanging ideas. I've been extremely impressed with our city manager and our finance director. Frankly, the audit committee could not have gotten started at a better time, and at the same time that the two of them have started their positions. Their interest in cleaning up and recording procedures and policies and with documentation, and then holding employees accountable certainly matches up with what you'd expect an audit committee to do. And so frankly, I could not be more pleased and impressed by the two of them, the city manager and the finance director. The goals of the committee have been consistent with the city and city manager's efforts, and along those lines, just like to reiterate the point of an audit committee. It is not to dictate policy in terms of here's how you should be spending money or not spending money or do this or do that. It's to review procedures to make sure there are best practices in place for where there should be, and that the city is then following them. So when we touch on budget matters, there's potential overlap for budget, for instance, but it's not to tell you how to spend money. It's, do you have a budget manual? And then perhaps it's up to others like the finance committee to say what's in that budget manual, for instance. So we're doing our best to try to stay true to the mission. Are there best practices in place? And then again, that's different than telling you how money should be spent. The most important reason why I want to come today is just to plant the seed that this committee will need more funding to do its job well. For those on the previous council, remember when the previous council passed this, there was a lot of discussion of does the city hire an internal auditor who would be more efficient price-wise in terms of being able to have a set salary and continue on audits as priorities go, or do you use outside auditors, which has the benefit of getting the expertise based on the type of audit you're doing at any given point, but also inherently is going to be more expensive. So either way, there's not funding for either right now. So I think if you want the audit committee to succeed and do well and do the job that it is tasked to do, and as Alderman Payon suggested, I think it'll return the money or at least prevent fraud and abuse or wasting money. I think that those are going to be important questions for you when it comes up for a budget. There'll also be, I think, other related pieces of legislation. I was very excited to hear that procurement legislation is in the queue and on its way. I think that's very important for having good government and good process in place. And I think there'll be some other tweaks that the audit committee recommends the full council consider. So I appreciate your moments to consider these thoughts, and always good to see you all. Thank you. I'll certainly welcome any questions that you have.
Are there any questions?
Alderman Henson?
Wait a minute, you're on the committee.
I just wanted to say thank you, Mr. Chair, for your leadership on this. You have assembled an excellent team of professionals from the community that really help to enrich the processes in the city. And I would echo Mr. Littman's sentiments on the city manager and the finance director, and they're working with the audit committee. I did want to point out to my colleagues that on the agenda tonight is R619, Annual Statement of Performance Standards. That was something that was the audit committee noticed that we were not performing that function that was existing in the code. So we did prompt the city manager to make sure that we were doing that so that we could make sure every department had a review, had a performance metrics where they were measuring their success. So that is something that's a tangible benefit that we can already see that the work of the audit committee is adding to making sure that we have the best practices here in the city.
Yeah, that was a real problem because we all wanted to do performance audits right off the bat. Now, they're a little more expensive, but that's okay. What we're doing now is as best we can, a performance audit with Rec and Parks. But because we don't have as defined standards as we would like to have, we're supposed to have had them for year after year. Sometimes we've gotten them, sometimes we haven't, but I think those days are over, according to the city manager, and hopefully we'll have something to really measure performance by at this point. That's a very important point that Alderwoman Henson brought up.
Alderwoman Tierney?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I'm glad you said something, because I noticed it was the first time that, it wasn't submitted last year, and thank you for scrubbing the code and pulling that out. And it isn't just a, bureaucratic thing. There's actually good information. It makes you feel proud about what our city does.
If I could add, that's the whole point of audit, is you want to be able to hold people accountable. Again, not as a gotcha, but that's just what you expect. And it's hard to hold people accountable if you don't have procedures in place, standards in place, and I think that's what the committee and your city manager are trying to accomplish.
Alderwoman Pindell-Charles?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Chair, as well as Mr. Littman. It has been an honor to serve on the audit committee, and thank you all so much for your leadership and for the members that we have assembled for the committee. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay. Thank you for all your
Thank you. I'll hand, Mr. Mayor, if I might have just a moment to hand out
Sure.
to everybody what I was referring to. Thank you.
While you're handing that out, does anybody else like to do a report? Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Environmental Matters Committee will be meeting on February 20th at 3 p.m. There's just a few tentative things we have on the agenda. It's not confirmed yet, but let's see. We'll be getting some updates on environmental reviews, on pending developments from planning and zoning. We'll be getting a report on the implementation of our no-no-loss legislation from planning and zoning and the Office of Environmental Policy. And thank you. Also be getting a presentation from the Office of Environmental Policy on plastic bag legislation from other jurisdictions. Updating our plans associated with our Watershed Restoration Fund from the Department of Public Works. And discussing 0319 sidewalk, snow, and ice removal. And a special events ordinance, I believe. That's all.
Thank you. Alderman Henson.
Why not? The Housing and Community Development Committee meets on Wednesday, February 13th. We will be hearing from all the applicants that have submitted community development block grant applications. And then the regular meeting of the Housing and Human Welfare Standing Committee meeting is on Tuesday, February 19th at 6 p.m. Both are here in council chambers. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Finlayson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Rules and City Government Committee will meet tomorrow, Tuesday, February 12th at 4 o'clock here in council chambers. We'll be entertaining 3 appointments, 2 to the Ethics Commission and 1 to the Board of Appeals. And we'll be taking up CA 218, Charter Amendment on aldermanic titles. Tomorrow, 4 o'clock here in council chambers. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Pindell-Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Public Safety Committee met on February the 4th at 6 p.m. here in council chambers. We did not have any legislation before the committee. However, we did have several recognitions of persons, as well as the segment Did You Know and Spotlight. Police Chief Baker was present, recognized officers. Fire Chief Stokes was present, recognized EMS Supervisor, Deputy Fire Chief, Officer of Emergency Management, Director Simmons, and Exercise and Training Outreach Coordinator Thomas were present and recognized volunteers. Debbie Saylor, representing Anne Arundel County Health Department, was present and addressed the committee. Bruce Moore was present and addressed the committee. Ron Bowler and Ron Bowles were present and addressed the committee. And General Coleman and Chaplain Cope, representing USVRC, were present and addressed the committee. Next meeting will be on Monday, March 4th, 2018 at 6 p.m. here in council chambers. Thank you.
Oh.
Alderman Tierney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This Thursday, February 14th, yes, it's Valentine's Day. Joe, are you listening? And it's a joke. We have a transportation committee meeting, and we were supposed to have this last month to have a presentation by Department of Public Works on the Randall/Dock Street intersection. So Lisa has agreed to present a PowerPoint demonstration, and being chair, I asked that it could be open to the public for their comments after the presentation, and we'll start on time.
Okay, thank you everyone for your reports on your committees. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is comments by the general public.
During comments by the public may speak on any item not scheduled for public hearing tonight. Legislation scheduled for public hearing are 45-18, 2018 Forest Drive Eastport Sector Study, and O-3-19 Sidewalk Snow and Ice Removal Fine. Okay, first speaker, please come forward. State your name and address. Stephen Cahill. Up there, yeah.
It is on. There we go. My name's Steve Kale. Excuse me. I live in Eastport at, at 524 5th Street. I'm also a business owner. I have an architecture firm that's just right down here at the city dock, actually right at the intersection that you just mentioned. So we're above the Big Cheese and across from Middleton's, at 47 Randall Street. Most of our work is high-tech commercial projects, not a lot in the city, though we have done some work in the city. I wanted to briefly comment on a couple of things. One, the intersection, and then on the adequate public facilities ordinance. I understand that per the suggested pedestrian strategies outlined in the recent ULI report, that you are considering the placement of a temporary pedestrian light at Randall and Dock Street. My staff and I navigate that daily, multiple times a day, and you know, yes, it's challenging, and I'm sure that there are some safety issues associated with it. I'm not sure about certain about the long-term need for a pedestrian signal at that location. However, I would certainly agree to test one to see. You certainly don't want to forego safety. Regarding the adequate public facilities ordinance, my impression when reading this proposal is that it appears to be an effort to control real estate development and growth in the city. I would caution not to treat development and growth as inherently bad. The development hasn't created this issue, and new development won't make it worse. In fact, when properly planned and managed, intelligent growth strategies and development provide opportunity and improved quality of life. A recent Brookings Institute report states that every region should pursue 3 goals: growth, prosperity, and inclusion. You would be doing our city a greater service by working with professionals in the community to develop a comprehensive plan that outlines a vision and guidelines for moving forward. Our city has amazing qualities, as we all know: history, architecture, the waterfront, the Naval Academy, St. John's, the Capitol, the Bay, our proximity to Baltimore and DC, and our proximity to nearby Fort Meade, which is a hub for the highest levels of the technology industry. Our city has a tremendous amount of potential. Let's do our best to realize it. Thank you.
Thank you. See Alex out there. Next speaker signed up, Ryan Sears.
Good evening. Thanks for having me out and hearing me out here. Ryan Sears, I'm a lifelong resident of Annapolis, and I want to comment on the adequate public facilities ordinance.
Just state your address. Thanks, Ryan. Yeah.
144 Duke of Gloucester
Thank you.
Street here in Ward 1. And yeah, I've been a business owner for 15 years. I did a high-tech startup, and also as a real estate developer. I did one real estate deal and turned that into 400 real estate deals over 8 years. And so I've kind of lived on all sides of this and have been a resident here and appreciate the historic nature of Annapolis and the unique assets that it brings growing up here. I also started an organization called Launch Annapolis, which is a nonprofit that connects entrepreneurs to resources. And it was just a couple of us at first, and now it's over 2,000 members. And these are business owners that revolve around the Annapolis economy. And I've also had the pleasure of traveling around the country to places like Portland, Maine, Charleston, South Carolina, Santa Barbara, California. And these are places that have historic downtown districts that have balanced the development that is going on in the city with a historic culture. And so I just like to add that there is a playbook out there for doing this in a balanced way. And I got the same sense that this was really restrictive to the development that's going on. And a lot of these, one of the facts that I learned in this journey of helping to support early stage businesses is that 50% of all new jobs come from these high growth companies. And that was really a surprise to me. So combined with small businesses and large businesses, you know, they create a lot of the jobs. And so one of the main things that these businesses need is a continued growth of housing stock that's affordable and mixed use development, so that you can have employees that want to work at these companies and enjoy a live, work, play and atmosphere. And many of these employees, they actually use public transportation. A lot of them don't own cars. They use bike shares. They ride bikes to work. And so they need to be in the general facility of where they work. And so if we're going to future-proof and have these kinds of new jobs, then we need to support high-growth companies which create 50% of the jobs. And they need this mixed-use, affordable housing. And so that's a big part of what I saw in the ordinance. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Judy Jones, next up.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. My name is Judy Jones. I live at 10 Fleet Street. in Annapolis, downtown Annapolis, and I am here this evening to comment on the traffic signal warrant study conducted by Sabra and Associates and the City of Annapolis. On January 23rd, 2 presentations were given to the public on this study. I went to the one in the morning. The study's purpose was to evaluate the existing traffic conditions on Randall Street and to determine whether a traffic signal was warranted at the intersection of Randall and Dock Street. 5 alternatives were presented. Each had disadvantages, but it was concluded that alternative number 2 was the most advantageous for further study and review. In summary, number 2 provided the best overall performance. Namely, there should be, the report said, a traffic signal with bump outs and a channelized right turn at Randall Street and Dock Street and a traffic signal at Prince George Street. Now, why I'm here, I think the study was very thorough, very detailed, examining traffic patterns, accidents, pedestrian and vehicular traffic, and accidents, other accidents. At the intersection of Randall and Dock Street, there were 7 crashes between January 1st, 2015 and December 31st, 2017. 7 accidents, in my opinion, doesn't constitute an emergency. Now, I suppose if I were one of those accidents, I would consider it an emergency. And I'm not saying that to be facetious. I'm just saying, you know, I'm sitting here saying this, but, you know, it might be a major problem. But an attendee during the workshop said, this is a solution in search of a problem. Also, $50,000 for the consultant fee and almost $500,000 for the project, in my opinion, is very expensive. Why not simply, and I know I'm simplifying this whole thing, but why not simply return the crosswalk, which was in front of Market Space, where it once was? That might solve problems. The ULI report also mentioned this T intersection that I know a lot of people are opposed to. But I think why I'm really here is that we got the impression that we were there to listen and to give opinions. However, an article in the paper, in the Capitol, said basically that this study was a done deal. I wish I had brought with me the actual date, but it was in, I believe it was in January, early January, that this article appeared. And this is also with apologies to Alderman Pindell Charles. I know she is in favor of this traffic light. That's not what my argument is. My argument is that I think we should study it more. In October, the Urban Landscape Institute held a 2-day workshop with residents, city officials, Historic Annapolis, and Ward 1 attending. After studying all the recommendations, ULI released their report. By the way, one of their comments was to study a signalized intersection at Randall and Dock Street. They didn't recommend installing it. They recommended studying it. Historic Annapolis now has the study, along with city officials, the National Trust for Historic Preservation, Preservation Maryland, the Ward 1 Residents Association, the downtown business community, and Annapolis City residents. Their task now is to formulate a plan for implementing this study. I suggest that before we start putting traffic signals at Randall and Dock Street, maybe we should look at the overall picture that ULI has given and do that first, and then see where the traffic lights may fit in. That's really basically all I ask. And I want to just close with one thing. One of our former residents, Gilbert Renault, some of you might know who he is. He was talking about these volunteer committees. Sorry, I'm just going to end with a quote I really like. However, where I think the process may have gone wrong is that the consultants put together a plan without getting consensus or even a majority vote on most of the recommendations. And that's what I would like to see, that we study this a little bit further before we study the plan that ULI gave. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Judy. Alderwoman Pindell-Charles wants to ask a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms.
Yes.
Jones, I want to make one clarification.
Okay.
That quote I did make, but it didn't have anything to do with Randall and Dock. It was the traffic signal at Gibraltar and West Street. And I know the Capitol indicated that they were going to make the correction. We were having a conversation at the work session, and we were talking about both traffic signals. So that's what that was. So no.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for bringing it up.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Next up is Kevin Sullivan. I'd missed you, sorry, Kevin. And then Chris is right after that.
Good evening.
How you doing?
My name's Kevin Sullivan. I live at 7 Cumberland Court. I've been trying to work through an issue with my government for some time now. I received a response from this administration on January 29th in response to a Maryland request for information. I've given a package to Alderman Payon and Alderman Finlayson and my own alderwoman. This doesn't answer the question that Alderman Payon and Alderwoman Finlayson asked this administration. It was to answer the request for information regarding that under a Maryland Freedom of Information request. Here's the request. It's stamped the 14th of September, or the 12th of September, 2014. In this package that I handed out this evening, it has a few things in it. Some remarks from the March 13th, 2007 HPC Commission meeting, where they told me that they don't do air conditioners. I would tell you that after that they did St. Mary's, and the chairman had to recuse herself because she was on the board of the Carroll House. So that was misleading right from the start, as far as I'm concerned. If you go to the next page, the then city manager, after several emails to me, said that he's just catching up on some emails and that he thinks that we residents, meaning him and I, because he was dismissed shortly after this, must continue to stand up for what is right. It's going to take a long time to fix everything, but we got to keep at it. So here we are. Been here 40 years. Been dealing with this issue for about 12. If you go to the next page, you'll see some. In 2006, my attorney, after I had several conversations with HBC leadership, staff at the commission, whatever they call it, chief of historic preservation, he had to send a letter, and he did, spelling out where they were wrong, where they were misled in regards to what they were trying to accomplish. They've never been able to show me any documentation in regards to what they did. Over 17 administrative approvals. Then John Aronson stopped by, he was at that time, the head of planning and zoning, and sent a memo to the HPC and spoke at a meeting of the HPC. That memo is in the package that I sent you. It's the second page over after that. The reason I bring that up is because, see, I didn't bring this up. The head of planning and zoning brought it up about 8 years ago. Our law department 3 times have told me 3 different things in regards to my questions. I have them all documented. I've given them back to you, sir, and to this administration, and to other administrations. They sent a letter August 30th, 2012, saying that they didn't want to get involved, so they stood back, but yet 17 administrative approvals and after the fact approvals were given during their time when they didn't want to get involved because of the lawsuits that were caused. There's some photographs at the back of these documents that I've given to the alderwomen and men that I have, and a couple of articles from the newspaper. I'd like you to take a look at the one particular photograph that has the rain falling off of it. See, they're telling me that this building doesn't need gutters. That's not true. Again, I don't know why they made me an enemy. I always supported this government. I have faith in democracy. You got to change. So, with this, I'd like to sit down with somebody.
So Kevin, you've got a response to your request for information or not? Did you get a response?
No, I never got it, Mayor. No,
Okay.
sir.
So what was the piece of paper you were holding up in the beginning, is that?
Well, this doesn't answer the request. The request was for,
You familiar with this?
let's see, the city inspector report with regards to 217 King George Street, Annapolis, Maryland. This request is being sent to the Office of Law under the PIA, Maryland Public Information Act, September 12th, 2014. I've gotten some responses. The first response told me that an admin person signed off on everything. An admin person, the chief of historic preservation.
Okay, well, I'm going to get the city attorney to reach out to you and try to get this information to you, okay?
Well, you know, yeah, I guess that's all I can say is yeah, but you never get back to me. See, this was supposed to get to me October 8th. That's when Mrs. Finlayson set the date. Right here. All you guys are here. She asked it October 8th. I got it January 29th, the year later, quarter later. It's unique, not unique to this government and to this building. So yeah, I'd like to hear back. I'll tell you what I'd like to do, Mayor. I'd like to sit down with you and Doug Smith, and a couple of guys that were in on this from the beginning years ago. They're still your neighbors, and tell you what happened. We're not blaming you, sir. Well, we're holding this government accountable. Understand the difference?
Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Kevin. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So where are we? Thank you.
So we have your
Where
address
am I?
here.
Who's going to reach out to me now?
The city attorney will reach out to you to see where you are on this.
You have my number, sir? Gary Ellison has my number, the author of this documents, several of them.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Chris Bukeister signed up to speak next. How you doing?
Good evening, Mayor Buckley and City Council. My name is Chris Bucheister. I live at 5 Wagner Street, downtown Annapolis. First off, I want to thank you all for letting me come up and speak tonight. I want to shout out to our Alderwoman Tierney for all of her constituent work in the last month, for sure. She's done a tireless effort, and she's really listening to what the residents are saying in our neighborhoods. I'm here just to talk to you real quick about the Urban Land Institute, the ULI, and the intersection with long-term positions that Ward 1 residents have had, and we both echo the same things. I shared an email with you earlier, so I won't go read this to you. I'll just go over the highlights for the record. But we do agree, and our interests intersect on the height and bulk, the walkability and biking, the parking, and the flooding that were all pointed out by the ULI study in October. We want to reach out to you all and say that WARA's long-term interest in this, we would like to be part of the executive steering committee when HA puts that together with the city. And I understand that's coming rather quickly. On one note, I'd like to encourage Alderwoman Pindell Charles that maybe there's an opportunity down on Gibraltar and West to allocate some of that money that they have for a stoplight down at Randall and Dock, because the residents certainly, I'm not sure what Alderwoman Tierney's informal unscientific poll says, but she's conducted one, and we certainly would like to see the crosswalk moved over to where it was back by the island, and I'm sure you know where I'm talking about. And we could do that as an easy pilot and see if that alleviates some of the backup. But I just wanted to thank you all for your support in WARA. We've been deep in these issues for many, many years, and sometimes I think we can be a little bit pointed because we care, and I don't want that to be misunderstood, that we care by testifying about things. Does that make sense? Anyway, that's all I have. Alderman Arnett.
Alderman Arnett.
So, since you brought up the steering committee, is the steering committee a city steering committee or is it an HA committee?
Combination.
It's combination, all right. One from column A, one from column B. All right, thank you. Who will be determining who sits on that steering committee?
We're trying to get input from everybody, from different wards, and there's a bunch of names that they've put up, and then there's some names that have come from the city, so still formulated now. So if you have some suggestions, please come forward. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know we were being solicited, but I will definitely come forward.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you all. I appreciate
you
your
very
time.
much. Steve Rogers, next up.
Good evening, Mayor and Aldermen and Alderpersons. Steve Rogers, 515 4th Street, Annapolis, Maryland. I'm going to follow the theme of a couple of the other speakers in development. I've given you all a sheet, and it's one of the precepts of smart growth. I have a very corny joke, and the corny joke is, how do you put an elephant's trunk in an alligator's mouth? Very carefully. So, to move forward on smart growth, we have to do some things way in advance. I was lucky enough to participate in Janet Owen's transition team years ago, and we studied all of Anne Arundel County and the growth areas and the criteria that we were adopting for the county. And one of the primary precepts is facilities first. Facilities first. And that takes really long-range planning, a lot of money, but if you invest it and put it in the right places where the opportunity areas that we learn about in our comprehensive plan and the Sexter study, if we pick the opportunity areas and then invest in the facilities going to those opportunity areas, then it's not a big flap. There aren't a bunch of appeals when it comes time for a developer to say, I want to do this. If If it's in the opportunity area, we have the facilities, the sewer, the water, and all that, then it works. But what we're doing right now is we're having little upstarts of redevelopment and development, maybe in opportunity areas and maybe not, that are creating static among the citizens because there aren't adequate facilities, or they're right on the verge of being inadequate or adequate. And we can wiggle the rules all we want and make them come out right. But what we don't want to do is destroy the schools, put the burden of the capital investment on the citizens. So I am suggesting that we do a scientific way of coming up with impact fees for somebody that wants to build in Annapolis, from the single residence to a commercial project or a multifamily unit place or low-cost housing. We have to come up with impact fees. The county does this, and I've done permits where impact fees killed the project because the developer didn't have enough money. So we've got to figure out what a unit cost of sewer pipe is, what a unit cost of water pipe, what a unit cost of storm drain, unit cost of adding a student to school, unit cost of adding another police officer, another fire truck, all those unit costs. And when somebody comes in for a permit, you say, okay, I'm going to go down my table, these are the unit costs, I add them together, this is your permit fee. And you're paying in advance, but you're really paying for the past. So it's not a Ponzi scheme, but you have to pay in the future to be able to support what's happened in the past, and you keep rolling that over so that we citizens don't pay for a developer to make money. It's not my job to do an ROI for a developer. Okay, and I hope the mayor understands I don't want to pay for a developer. And so if you can come up with this table, and scientific, the engineers in Public Works can do this for you, and all the departments, then we call that an offset cost. We know what the offset cost is, here's the impact fee. And then beyond that, I'm suggesting that we bond every development for compliance with city directives and codes. So it's a compliance bond. So we had lots of stormwater going into the creek this last winter. And if they're not complying with stormwater management, then they ought to be, their bond, part of it should be forfeited. So if we bond people, and so the money is where everybody is. If you follow the money, if you make money speak, and if you do the right kind of planning, we have a 6-year plan in the Public Works Department. Please have that developed into an impact fee structure and charge the developers what they really are costing us. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. I
Any
like
questions?
your ideas. Alderman Tierney has a question. Steve?
Oh, hi. Yeah. Just a quick question. You mentioned impact fees, and I understand your model, but would you say that the county has implemented that impact fee model successfully?
They have a rather aggressive program. I think Ms. Sutherland could probably tell you more about that, but it's just a derivative of actual costs. I've qualified in courts in 3 or 4 states on estimating on projects, and all you have to do is take one of these estimating software things and you figure out all the elements of what a developer's going to put in and the unit cost of the size and scope of the project. And then it's just a multiplication. And you have to be aggressive about that to bank the money, to put in a fund for when we do have to replace sewer pipes and stuff, it's all paid for. Nobody should be having a free ride anymore.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Steve. Next up, Dr. Ellie Gomez.
Evening, Mayor. Thank you for having me here and council. I'd like to start off by saying, yeah, I'm a physician, and I'm really glad that healthcare economics is so much less complicated than all this. So I'm a physician and a healthcare business consultant, but and I live just over the Severn on Meadow Hill Drive, 1749. But I'm also commenting on the importance of allowing for adequate development of workforce housing. And I came to appreciate that even more when we were having conversations about how we were going to collaborate with the county in regards to developing empowerment of communities that have been historically not a part of economic progress in the city. I participated on Stuart Pittman's transition team with regard to economic development. And it's one of the key recommendations that we've made with regard to moving businesses throughout the county. It's been picked up as one of the recommendations that we made to Pete Smith as a priority. So it may be obvious, I haven't heard it stated here, maybe folks just take it for granted, but if people don't have decent affordable housing, there's just no way they're going to be able to move up the food chain, so to speak, of economic progress in the city. And so we have the illusion that we have two communities, sort of polar economies happening of the disenfranchised and those that have. When in fact, a lot of folks are commuting in or commuting out to perform those functions. And so, and in addition to that, there's well-established families with kids that just graduated college, like my daughter, trying to figure out how she can live and work as she's doing her internships and in DC, commuting back and forth, and trying to find ways to make do here. Had to turn down an opportunity at Maryland Hall because there was no way for her to be independent on that salary in this town. So, I don't want to belabor the point. I'm not trying to be complex about it. That's what I'd like you to regard as you make these decisions with regard with development and affordable housing for folks that are in that middle bracket. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Ellie, Alderman Arnett, what's the question for you? Yeah.
So thank you for coming. This is a topic that has been on our minds. As I look at the situation, we're in largely a built environment, and when you look at the aforementioned return on investment, it seems that high-end development, even multifamily development, is very expensive. The slated apartment building to go in the Eastport Shopping Center has rents that are as high as my mortgage payment. So does the county have some things that they're looking at that we can emulate, that we can follow in terms of figuring out how to find this affordable housing?
Yeah, I think at this point it's just kind of exploratory. I don't think any particular sites have been identified, but the recommendation made that that's just a key part of trying to grow talent here, especially young talent.
I know, I guess Brian Sears has left, but he would applaud that as he's trying to bring in high-tech companies. And we talked about this at a meeting last Friday morning about also improving the quality of education, because that's one of the things that people look at before they decide where to locate. Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you. Next up is Diane Butler.
Good evening, Mayor Buckley, councilmen, councilwomen. I would first like to say I'm testifying on behalf of the Eastport Civic Association, and I'll be brief because I know that you heard a lot from our neighbors last time around. But first, I'd like to thank staff for their countless hours on the sector study. I think it's a great start for work going forward on our comprehensive plan. we have a great opportunity to coordinate with the county and to have partnerships in place for all the laudable items suggested in the study, especially those items that depend on county city funding mechanisms. If we don't have the county's buy-in now, who's going to fund these partnerships? Does the city want to go it alone? I don't think so. So let's try to nail that down. We have the opportunity to do it now. Another point I want to make is that the Planning Commission on November 1st asked city staff to clarify some of the data referenced in the study, including how they reconcile the study cited in Appendix B that indicates that adding residential units does not, in and of itself, increase our tax base, but actually strains infrastructure and has a negative impact on jurisdictions like ours. Planning and zoning has not provided any additional explanation, and we think it's really important to have this economic question answered.
So this is not the public hearing for the sector study?
I'm so sorry. I was asking Susie about that. So should I just come back up when that's...
Yeah, it's coming up pretty soon, yeah.
And then the
yeah.
school capacity bill, same thing? I have to wait for that?
No, you can talk on that. Yeah.
Okay, so school, I'll be brief. And on this one, I'm not testifying on the, as the Eastport Civic Association representative. All I want to say about that is, if you have money in Annapolis and you don't like overcrowded classrooms, you can send your kids to one of a number of fine private schools. We all know that. We've got some of the best. So not all of us who live in Annapolis have money, and we don't have that luxury. So what I'd like to say is that I hope you'll do the right thing and vote not to overcrowd our schools.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else present like to speak? No, it's not up yet. Yeah, we'll call you when that's not up yet. So this is just the general comments. So seeing no one else in the chamber, declare the comments by the general public closed. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is the update from the mayor.
Thank you everyone for being here tonight. I'd first like to recognise the people who have been running the warming centre at the Stanton Centre. It was open 12 days in January, and so far it has been open 6 days in February. Deputy Chief Kevin Simmons coordinates this effort out of our Office of Emergency Management, and Nicole Queen, also out of OEM, has been critical in making sure there is adequate food and resources for the people who need to come in from the cold. On the ground at the Stanton Centre, I'd like to recognise Charles Tucker and William Haskin of We Care and Friends. These guys run the operation and stay overnight. In our city, it is important that we take care of one another. As we observe Black History Month this year, I'd like to mention an upcoming event we're hosting and give a shout out to a couple of great events that have already taken place. Coming up on February 23rd, the city will be hosting a Black History celebration at the Pip Moyer Rec Centre. It's 2 to 8 p.m. It's family friendly. It will include art, dance, food, music, and storytelling. Please come by. Last week I was honoured to attend Remembrance, Reconciliation and Healing, a film screening and a panel discussion at Maryland Hall. The panel discussion was especially enlightening because of the diversity of the panel and the openness with which the audience and the panel broached difficult subjects around racial reconciliation. Thank you to the organisers and panellists and Maryland Hall for hosting. It's a great way to use the venue for these important discussions. Over the weekend, Banneker Douglas hosted a birthday to honour Frederick Douglass. Even as we honour Frederick Douglass and talk about other great African Americans who have contributed so much to American society, I want to say the names of Black Annapolitans who were key to establishing roots and building the city we know today. Visit our City of Annapolis Facebook page to discover these names and take times. Regina's cutting me off. There's only 20 names in here, you know. Here are some of them. Thomas Folks, Smith Price, John Wheeler, Marcellus Hall, Henry Cooper, James Broadley, John W. Hall, Charles I. Harris, Loudon Pinkney, Henry Price, Charles Shorter, Reverend Alexandra Dennis, Nathaniel M. Carroll, Ellen Burley Smith, Jane Bishop, Georgia Boston, Sarah Boston, Alice Warren, Reverend J.T. Reed, Wiley H. Bates, William H. Butler Jr., William H. Butler Sr., George B. Lowry, J. Wesley Chase, J. E. Howard, William H. Howard, Robert M. Davis, and finally Dr. William Bishop. Last week, Amy Seitz of the Maryland Economic Development Association invited a group of Keep America Beautiful delegates from around the country to visit the city of Annapolis. I gave them a tour and talked about the ways we are working to keep Annapolis beautiful. Also last week, I visited 1750 Forest Drive. This is the old MAIF building, which had been vacated for 2 years. It has been renovated to be shared office space with state-of-the-art amenities to attract the kinds of businesses that will keep and attract high-tech workforce. One of the highlights of this visit was learning that $400,000 in tax revenue will come online once this building is at capacity. This is huge because previously MAIF did not pay taxes and we didn't collect anything on the vacant building. But aside from taxes, at capacity, this building will provide a little more than 400 jobs. The opioid epidemic has touched the lives of people from across the city. It has hit people rich and poor and of all races. We are working to find solutions and deliver resources and community services to people in the throes of addiction. To that end, we have our third Naptown Anti-Dope Movement Community Engagement Session this Saturday, February 16th, from 11 to 3 p.m. It's taking place at the Eastport Community Centre. The previous two events have been great for hearing stories and testimonials from people in recovery and also in finding resources. And finally, I would like to remind you all to look on the homepage of annapolis.gov to see the Urban Land Institute, or the ULI report. It includes key recommendations on planning for the city dock. The report is 32 pages, which seems long and onerous, but it's a lot of pictures. Pictures of the city in the summer. Reading this report can really take your mind off the wintry weather we're having. Check out the report by following the link to ULI report on our homepage. The next phase will be finding ways to implement the report. Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next
Mr. Mayor. I would like to recognize M.K. Soborowski, I know I get the last name all wrong, who's with the Office of Emergency Preparedness.
Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you. Alderman Tierney?
I do just want to add to that story of if you all remember the frigid night that we had, they did take in an 18-year-old young woman who was pregnant and helped her with services. I believe the Red Cross got involved, and so that was quite a story. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. We're lucky to have you. Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is required administrative submittals presented by the city manager.
Good evening. There are 3 things on the agenda to present to you tonight that are required to be submitted. So the first is pursuant to section 204080 of the City Code. The committee, commission, boards, and authorities shall prepare and deliver to the City Council an annual report regarding activities during the preceding year, and the report shall include the attendance of each member. The boards and commissions have submitted this information to the city clerk. It is attached as an agenda item required to be submitted to you. The second are 3 budget transfers less than $25,000 within a fund that the city manager is permitted to do without council approval, but required, again, to submit to you and just report it to you. So there are 3 budget transfers. One is for $964. It was left over from one federal grant that OEM got for vehicle purchases that the federal government allowed us to reallocate or reprogram for salaries towards the incident management team coordinator salary. The second is a $4,122 transfer from seasonal salaries to boat maintenance in the harbor master's office in the grant fund. And that was to use funds that were left over there to use them for the boat maintenance, pump out boat. And then the third is a transfer from Recreation and Parks in the general fund from their wellness programs to the harbor master's office, $25,000 towards salaries. The salaries in the harbor master's office, from what you all budgeted, are just too low. They're not sufficient to cover the salaries of the existing employees from the salary schedules that the former finance director had put together and submitted to us. So this is to try and correct that and give them sufficient funds in their salary line item. It's all within Recs and Parks Department. So no increase in the Recs and Parks budget, but a reallocation from the wellness program to the harbor master's office.
Alderman Finlayson?
Yes, for the city manager, is this enough to get us through the rest of this fiscal year?
No.
So we should expect to see another transfer?
You should. We are, at this point, we were waiting, as you know, at the end of December. We have the whole Viva CHOP thing takes place. That's taken place. So we are now doing projections to reallocate funds from the labor reserve, from the Viva CHOP, and we're hopeful we'll identify what we need there to make up what the harbor master needs.
Okay.
But this is no extra money for the harbor master for additional people or anything like that. It's simply funding the salaries of the 2 people that are in their salary and benefits line item.
Okay, thank you.
And then finally, the third item.
May I?
Alderman Henson?
Yes.
What does that do to the operation of the wellness program?
They're going to have to find a way to live within that budget. Recs or we can transfer money around, again, within Recs and Parks as it moves on or from another department. But Director Trader identified this as the funding source from which he wished to take it at this point to reallocate to the harbor master.
Thank you.
And then finally, the third item is a report. Section 62402 of the code establishes a non-lapsing fund for the purpose of collecting and retaining funds from public and private sources for the display of art in public places, production of performing arts, and advancement for works of art. The Arts in Public Places Fund that you all have heard about. It says that the finance director shall submit a report on the financial status of the fund during the preceding year. It doesn't say who the finance director submits that report to, so we decided you were the lucky recipients. So the third item is a report on the financial status of the Arts in Public Places Fund during fiscal year 2018, and we have also provided that information to the Arts in Public Places Commission. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar include approval of Journal of Proceedings, CCM 011419, regular meeting minutes, CCM 011719, special meeting minutes, CCM 012819, special meeting minutes. Supplemental allocation from surplus funds, SA-41-19, Fire Grant Fund, FY19 Advanced Life Support, or ALS, Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Services Systems, or MEMS, training and education funds in the amount of $6,494.06. SA-42-19, Office of Environmental Policy, Grant Fund, Maryland Department of Natural Resources, FY19 Community Resiliency Grant in the amount of $40,100. SA-43-19, Transportation Department, Transportation Fund, Maryland Transportation Authority, Federal Transit Authority, insurance proceeds from totaled buses in the amount of $100,096. On first reader, CA-1-19, Acting Mayor Designation, referred to the Rules and City Government Committee. O-6-19, the conveyance of part of the unimproved portion of the city-owned right-of-way containing the roadbed of Castlegate Drive to Lee et al., LLC. O-7-19, special parking permit for transport, shuttles, and contractors, application procedure, referred to the Public Safety Committee and the Transportation Committee. R-4-19, state-mandated annual appropriation for City of Annapolis services, and R-6-19, annual performance standards or statements, 2019. And that concludes the consent calendar.
Is there any objection to items on the consent calendar?
Move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Mayor Buckley?
Yes.
Alderman Arnett?
Aye.
Alderwoman Tierney?
Aye.
Alderman Payon?
Aye.
Alderman Pendel Charles?
Aye.
Alderman Finlayson?
Aye.
Alderman Rodriguez?
Aye.
Alderwoman Henson?
Aye.
Alderman Savage?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is public hearing, continued. Resolution R-45-18, 2018 Forest Drive Eastport Sector Study, for the purpose of adopting the Forest Drive Eastport Sector Study as an addendum to the 2009 Annapolis Comprehensive Plan.
So we have some clarification on this. Speakers who spoke at the public hearing on R-45 on 1/28/19 cannot speak tonight, so Regina can clarify the rules on that.
So on the speaker form, we have Mr. Rogers and Ms. Natalie Benacosta-Powell. You presently spoke at the hearing on the 28th, so with public hearings, you can only speak on the public hearing item one time.
Diane, you can speak.
Anybody else can speak.
Because you didn't speak at the last one. I don't make the rules.
Yeah.
Diane Butler, 407 3rd Street, Annapolis. And I'm speaking on behalf of the Eastport Civic Association, who did provide testimony last time, but this is additive, hopefully not redundant. And since I was halfway through it, I'll just try to skim. But basically, we wanted to thank city staff for the hard work on the comprehensive plan. We think it's a great opportunity to start on our on the sector study. We think it's a great opportunity to get us started on our new comprehensive plan. And the sector study is a great opportunity right now to coordinate with the county because they're doing their general development plan. So there are a lot of places in the sector study where there are items calling for partnerships, and those partnerships aren't in place right now. So we think this is a perfect time to nail down the partnerships that we need, especially for those items where they call for county-city funding mechanisms. So I think we should get the county's buy-in before we go forward with some of these things, get the partnerships established, just nail this down first, otherwise it probably won't happen. And the point I started to make before I realized that it wasn't my time to speak was the Planning Commission on November 1st, before I was appointed to the Planning Commission, had asked city staff to clarify some key data referenced in the study that was included in Appendix B. And they asked to reconcile a particular study that indicated that adding new residential units does not increase our tax base. In fact, it actually strains infrastructure and has a negative impact on jurisdictions like ours. So planning and zoning, as far as I know, has not been provided with the additional information or explanation that we think is really important to the economic question, and that must be answered before we think approval by this body. And the final comment has to do with self-rule. At the last city council hearing, someone from Eastport, I think, actually I didn't know who it was, someone asked whether we could allow each ward to make a decision on what they want for their wards in terms of the sector study. I think that's a great idea. If one ward wants to be, included in a growth opportunity area and one doesn't, wouldn't it make sense to let that ward decide what they want to do? So I think it's a great idea to let each ward hold meetings and decide where they want to fit into the new comprehensive plan and what they want to look like in the sector study. So I'm asking you to not approve the sector study in its current form, especially because it would retroactively amend our 2009 comprehensive plan, which makes no sense at all. Let's use it as a mechanism, a guiding document going forward for our future. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present who hasn't spoken? Please come forward, state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Kate Bohannon. I live at 157 Quiet Waters Place. I'm here to represent the Environmental Commission this evening. We did submit written comments to the council and the mayor on January 28th, so I presume it's still okay for me to speak because I haven't done that yet. Our comments were regarding the sector study and specifically the environmental component. I know that a lot has been discussed about traffic, and that's really important, but the our tree canopy goals and stormwater management, we would argue, are equally as important. We've detailed in our, so we wrote, you all note on the 28th, but on October 30th of last year, we submitted some very specific recommendations related to the plan, environmental recommendations to the Planning Commission. And I've sent you all a copy of those for your review as well. But the summary of all the comments is that the plan doesn't seem to take into account our existing environmental goals, namely our stormwater goals as well as our tree canopy goals. There's some things that we think could be added to the plan that would strengthen it and allow us to meet those goals and not have this plan be in a separate vacuum, not kind of putting those goals off on the corner and not taking them into account. And really what I mean by that, for example, with urban tree canopy, as you know, we have a goal to meet 50% urban tree canopy by 2036. Well, if we do this redevelopment that's proposed in the study, we need to figure out how we're going to meet that goal. And so one of our recommendations was to have the city forester perhaps map out a plan of the existing trees along the Forest Drive corridor and then figure out how we can either protect those trees or add to them in cooperation with the county. We completely agree with the Eastport Civic Association that there needs to be more detail about how we work with the county, specifically on trees and stormwater as well. So I do want to recognize that environmental groups were consulted, it looks like very early on in the study, and I definitely appreciate that. But the Environmental Commission at this moment doesn't feel like that our goals have been really represented, and we need to make some adjustments to the current draft.
Alderman Savage.
Thank you for your time putting together these reports and for coming out to testify. Have you heard from any staff member from Planning and Zoning or the consultant themselves about, just in receipt of your comments, about are they looking at incorporating them?
At this time, we have not heard from the Planning Commission regarding our comments on October 30th, no. Okay. So I believe we did speak at their hearing, but, and then subsequently the Planning Commission made recommendations to the council, but they did make a good recommendation about the Greenway plan and trying to make the plan more bike friendly, and we support that, but they didn't really address our stormwater or the tree canopy aspects.
Well, I'd like to invite yourself or another member from the commission to come to, I believe the March Environmental Matters Committee is probably the one that'll be discussing the sector study. So we can certainly get into a much more robust conversation at that time.
Good.
Thank you. Anybody else like to come forward who hasn't spoken on R-45-18. How you doing?
Hi, Jennifer Balducci, 31 Glen Avenue in Annapolis, president of SOFO. I did not speak the last meeting, but I felt like I needed to just kind of add a little bit to what maybe hasn't been spoken about. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel with what we're trying to show with the Forest Drive sector study, meaning that people want walkable places, they want mixed-use development, and we're, as a city, I don't feel like Annapolis it's not a new concept. This has been done in lots of other places around the country. The piece that I think is missing is just how do we accomplish that? So we have this great vision, and we all agree that like this looks lovely, and it's so, you know, what a great idea, but how do we get it to happen? And so what I'm worried about is if we just pass the sector study as is, but we don't really show a way how to draw the development that we want in, there's going to be a disconnect. So we still will get just piecemeal, we're going to put this here, put that there, because it fits in the zoning that we have established, but we don't have somebody to really bring in that mixed-use vision. Rockville's done it. I don't know if you guys have looked at any of the things that they did to make that happen. But there's a lot of articles. You can pull them up online. Places in Colorado have done it. There's lots of ways to make mixed use actually happen and to implement it, whether you have a developer in mind that brings that vision to the city at a large scale. But if you just allow piecemeal kind of development to happen, you're never going to get that mixed use feel. So just whatever you guys can do to foster that and really give us more of a cohesive feel to Forest Drive versus another little strip mall or another little Starbucks or another little something. We want it to feel like it's more like a home that people want to live. Right now, you drive through Forest Drive and you go to the end to go live in Hillsmere or Bay Ridge, but along the way, I think there's a lot of opportunity for more mixed use. So walkable, tree-lined, fountains, stuff, shopping mixed in, things that people really want. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Jen. Anybody else like to speak? Okay, so I declare the public hearing.
Mr. Mayor, could I just make one comment? Because I had a resident, I told her I would relay her concerns. She lives on Cypress Lane, turning into right off of Bay Ridge, sorry. And she's a blind resident who is unable to come out to testify and obviously has difficulty writing. But she did express concerns to me. At first, she was afraid that they were going to, the city was going to try to take her property and convert it, but I assured her that's not the plan. But I explained it to her, but she still had concerns. So I'm going to work on relaying and communicating with her through the process, but I just wanted to make sure she was still a little concerned about traffic. That was her big concern, about if they converted that area to commercial, that it would bring in more traffic and impact her ability to live. So.
Okay. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you. For the record, her name, what's her name? Her name is, well, it was Miss Wilkerson. I'll find the address and send it.
Thanks, Rob. Alderwoman Tierney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand why my colleague last meeting extended the public hearing to for 2 more meetings. I would like to make a motion to conclude the public hearing on the 2018 Forest Drive Eastport sector study so that we can now commence the committee review.
Okay.
As a motion.
So how does that work on?
She needs a second.
We've advertised it.
Not for the next meeting yet.
Okay. Got a second?
Second.
Alderman Savage.
Thank you. I just asked my colleagues not to vote in favor of that motion. I've been trying to get the word out that the hearing has been extended till the 25th, I think it is, or 23rd, our next meeting. I know I have a number of residents of Bay Woods who were not able to make it the last meeting, and I know they didn't make it tonight, but I'm going to talk to them because I know they wanted to make sure they were had a chance to comment. And also, there's a public meeting on the 21st, I think. No, it's earlier than that. But there's the Annapolis Neck Peninsula Federation is holding a community meeting at the library few days before our last meeting in February. And they're going to be having planning and zoning there, the consultant, the planning commission. And so I think it'd be important to have anything that comes out of that be part of the public record, so people can then come to our meeting on Monday to testify if they wanted.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons I didn't mention that. I knew Anastasia was having this meeting, and I want the public to know that the committee, those are public meetings where they can actually learn more about the legislation. I just thought it would be more constructive to just move on with the committee hearings, and that was the reason for my motion to end the public hearing and move on to committee, where the public is welcome. Those are public meetings as well. I think every committee is going to be looking at this sector study. I believe every committee, if I'm not mistaken. So.
Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are having a work session on this on the 21st, correct? And at our last meeting, we were all over the map. I'm not sure that we ever did decide. It seemed like every committee wanted this to go before them. Then we had some discussion about having a joint committee meetings, so on and so forth. So I would hope we're not going to have 5 or 6 or 7 different committee meetings. Yes, committees are open to the public. The public is invited. They tend to be during the day, so it's not clear how the public can get to those committee meetings during the day. But I still think we need to settle on how we're going to hear all of this.
Okay. Any other comments? So we've got a first and a second. Right?
Can we just clarify how many committee meetings it's forwarded to? Sorry.
Did someone miss out?
Okay. All right. So just to answer.
So it's five committees, it's going to 5 committee meetings that are open to the public.
Yes.
But they are in hours that are, and then, and how many work sessions are?
They're not during the day? Rules is at 4 o'clock. So they're mostly evening meetings.
So we were going to extend it to the 25th, but there's a motion now to finish.
Yeah, because committee hearings can't start until the public hearing is closed.
Okay.
So that was my logic. So.
All right. All those in favour of Ellie's, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Roll call, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Buckley.
Aye.
Alderman Arnett.
No.
Alderman Tierney.
Aye.
Alderman Payon.
Aye.
Alderman Pendle Charles.
No.
Alderman Finlayson.
Aye.
Alderman Rodriguez.
No.
Alderwoman Henson.
Aye.
Alderman Savage.
No.
This hearing is closed.
What's that?
The hearing is closed tonight. It's 5-4.
There's still a lot of time for the public to comment on all those things.
Can't typically testify at a committee meeting. The public hearing technically closes. So.
Okay, Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is public hearing on Ordinance O-3-19, sidewalk snow and ice removal. Fine for making technical corrections to the code and the City of Annapolis concerning the fine for failure to remove snow and ice from a sidewalk.
So, Carolyn, we have one speaker signed up. Please come forward. State your name and address. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Patnode. I live at 25 Jefferson Place. I'm part of Ward 1, and I've come to some of these. I don't usually talk, but I feel like most people just get up and they're like, no, blah, 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 you know, and I want to say that I'm kind of for this action. There, you know, it's kind of just moving through, but it's a good chance for the community to make the businesses and the residents accountable. The snow and ice removal thing, you don't really realize the issues unless you're like, as much as if you don't have a sidewalk or you're not parking on the street. But those of us community members who are parking on the street and do have sidewalks, you know who, you know, when you're trying to walk through your neighborhood or park, who's shoveling and who's not. And the problem, you know, and you drive by and you see the businesses and stuff like that, but it's kind of only gotten worse. We have a lot of short-term rentals in our neighborhood and around town, and you know, the short-term rental that's right beside me, when the neighbors are home, you know, they're usually shoveling out their parking spot, you know, but when their short-term rentals are there, they're not, because they're borrowing my shovel, you know, so the short-term rental people aren't coming over to say, hey, Carolyn, can I use your shovel? So, you know, I think that's not the only problem, you know, with short-term rentals. I think there's some good and some bad, but businesses and neighbors and people just need to have plans for snow. I grew up in Vermont. We got 300 inches of snow a year, and you didn't go out of town and not like have a plan for somebody to remove your snow. You know, you usually took care of it yourself, but when you weren't in town, you called upon a neighbor, you hired someone, and that's what these businesses and these residents, and if I go out of town, I'm gonna say, hey, I'm out of town. If it snows, we clear the sidewalk, you know, just like I have them take out my trash, or, you know, and that's what neighbors do for each other. And I think that's kind of a fabric you lose when you have too many short-term rentals, is you lose that kind of, that neighborhood thing. And I'll probably end up shoveling my neighbor's sidewalk when their short-term rentals are there, just because, you know, it's a couple extra feet. But the problem, you know, with the parking too, it becomes contentious, and, you know, it becomes hostile, and people put their chairs out and their bins, and they, you know, I don't see that now, but you see that all over, and especially in cities that get quite a bit of snow. It's not realistic to think that the plow truck's gonna come through and clear out all the parking spots and everyone's gonna be able to park great. So the last snowstorm that we got, that I think dropped about 8 or 9 inches, I think I shoveled out 5 spots. I have a Honda Civic. Most people have Jeeps in my neighborhood, so I'd come home and I'd be like, oh, you know, and I'd like get the shovel out. So I'm glad to see some action going through on this to hold people accountable for the snow removal. And even though we don't get much of it, it's a chance for, you know, businesses to do the right thing, neighbors to say hello to each other, and you know, if there's an elderly neighbor who's not too far away, I didn't even ask her, I just shoveled in front of her sidewalk because I knew that they weren't going to be able to get out there. But it's a good chance for neighbors to know neighbors, and you need to have a plan. You know, if this is your second or your third home, or your short-term rental, or your regular home, and you're not going to be around, have a plan for snow, because it is going to snow. It's going to be icy, and I don't know. I'm for this. Thanks.
Thanks, Carolyn. At 6 Stewart Avenue is my
What's that?
So just said my address, 6 Stewart Avenue. If you next time you get that shovel out.
Yeah.
Anybody else like to speak? Okay, I declare the public hearing in O-3-19 closed. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is legislative actions on first reader, beginning with Resolution R519, Black History Month, for the purpose of recognizing and celebrating the month of February as Black History Month, and affirming that the City of Annapolis encourages all of its citizens to acknowledge the important contributions to American culture that have been made by African Americans.
Is there a motion to adopt R-5-19 on first reader?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion. I think, Alderman Savage.
Hold on a sec. I'm looking for it here. What's the number?
R-5-19.
R5. Ward 5, okay. I think this is the one I wanted to get added as a co-sponsor.
Okay, we'll make sure that Rob's a co-sponsor there. Okay. Right, Rob? Good?
Yeah.
Okay. Alderwoman Finlayson.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to be a co-sponsor also. I also spoke to Mr. Rowell, as he brought this to my attention, to suggest that we might want to consider adding a little bit of teeth to this. We all nationwide recognize Black History Month, so we're not unique in that respect. But I would like for us to be unique in that we're actually doing some activities to bring recognition to Annapolitans who have contributed to our history. I've put on our agenda the recognition of Mr. Coates, I think, for the next meeting, who was the first African-American firefighter in the city of Annapolis. He's in his 90s now, and, you know, just folks like that who are in our community that we need to recognize and share the stories of. So I think this is a good start. We should continue to add more recognitions to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, all those in favour of R-5-19 say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So is there a motion to suspend the rules to allow passage of resolution at the meeting of its introduction?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favour say, oh, any discussion, Sarah?
Yes. Add me as a co-sponsor as well.
Okay.
Myself as well, Mayor.
Yep. Any guys want to?
Unanimous.
All those in favour say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion passes. Is there a motion to adopt R-5-19 on second reader?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Mayor Buckley?
Yes.
Alderman Arnett?
Aye.
Alderwoman Tierney?
Aye.
Alderman Payoung?
Aye.
Alderwoman Pendle Charles?
Aye.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Aye.
Alderman Rodriguez?
Aye.
Alderwoman Henson?
Aye.
Alderman Savage?
Aye.
All right, the ayes have it. I'm sure the next one's going to be just as easy. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is legislative actions on second reader, beginning with Ordinance O-8-18, adequate public facilities, adequate school facilities, standards, for the purpose of amending the test for additional school capacity by requiring schools with enrollment greater than 95% of the state-rated capacity to be listed as closed on the annual school utilization chart, and matters generally relating to adequate school facilities.
So here we are on second reader on this bill. After 4 postponements and an uneven record of recommendation from committees, Housing, Human Welfare gave it a favourable, Rules and City Government wanted amendments, and Transportation gave it an unfavourable. Tonight I'm asking the City Council to postpone the final vote on the legislation as it stands, and here are 3 reasons why I urge you to join me in voting for a postponement. First is school capacity. A significant driver of this bill is school capacity. We can all agree with the assessment of the county school planners that Annapolis High School, currently at 95% capacity, is projected to be over capacity for 8 years. And it is the high school that we are really talking about. There is in the City of Annapolis school in the feeder, 9 primary schools and 2 middle schools that are projected to be at capacity in the next 8 years. I should note that Annapolis won't be the most crowded high school in the county. In fact, Annapolis will fall in the middle range of Anne Arundel County public schools, forecasted to be over capacity, at 109% of utilisation projected in 8 years. Annapolis will be well below Old Mill at 176% and North County at 146%. Still, we can all agree that students should not be forced into an overcrowded school. But the problem with tying our own hands in the City of Annapolis is that an empty seat we'll leave at the high school will simply be backfilled by feeders that are inbound to Annapolis High, but outside city limits. Let's say we pass this bill and limit capacity to 95%. Anne Arundel County gets those other 100 seats to fill. We've limited our ability to attract families to the city, and we're pushing these folks, instead of to live inbounds, to Rolling Knolls in order to attend Annapolis. The truth is, our kids will all still be meeting up in math class at Annapolis High. The city simply won't receive the tax revenue because they live outside the city limits. Second is a conversation about development. Is this legislation a band-aid for serious discussion about development? This is not how we build a smart city. We need to talk environmental impacts and transportation. This bill does none of that. I'm not alone in thinking this. In a recent editorial in the Capitol, they wrote that the city has been allowed to grow by sprawl with little thought about how it works as a whole. They note that some of the arguments against development come down to, not in my backyard. That's easy for politicians to say and simple for residents to hear, but it doesn't go very far in solving the problem. The Capitol editorial goes on to say, Annapolis needs to provide housing, commercial development, and transportation networks that attract people in their 20s and 30s. That generation is less interested in buying a home, and that means multi-family housing. This is a serious concern. We want young people to want to live here. We want tech-savvy workforce. We want them to choose to make this city their home. We can't do this if we are not giving them an affordable place to hang their hat. This leads me to the final point. 3, can we have a vision for the city for the long run? Are we thinking seriously about the workforce needs of businesses we need to attract? We need a diverse, thriving, and yes, young workforce. How do we get them here? By telling them that the only housing options are multi-million-dollar homes? We're attracting retirees and the wealthy with our current housing stock. Those people are good to add to the mix, but it needs to be a mix. They cannot be the only people we lure to the city, as the Capitol noted in its editorial. This status quo is forcing young people to look elsewhere to live, to start their lives. It already forces many people of modest means to look outside the city for affordable homes. We can pass this bill and exacerbate the problem, or postpone the vote and work to the language of the APF. Finally, and as previously noted in December, I have worked to get on the meeting calendar with the Education Commission, District 30 delegates Alice Kane and District Councilwoman Lisa Rodvian. In addition, Alderwoman Shanika Ensenova scheduled a charter high school tour. I move to postpone the vote, but we're open for discussion.
Do you need a second, Mr. Mayor? I'm sorry?
I didn't put a motion through, I'm just opening it for a discussion, you know.
Is it open for discussion?
Yeah. So.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to postpone to a date certain.
Okay.
Well, I think we can discuss.
It was 30 days from the last one, so let's get a clarification on that. Teresa, how long was the last postponement? So,
is 30 days sufficient for the meetings that you've set up?
That's what happened last time it popped up like that.
I don't know. I don't know how long the last one was postponed for. Perhaps the city clerk has that record. But you have to pick a date certain to postpone it to.
Right. I'm asking how long do you need, or do we need?
I mean.
Can I discuss before the second?
Your last action was on December 10th.
Okay.
Okay, so.
Like you to postpone up until a council meeting date, because sometimes with 31 days and 30 days, it doesn't make the agenda in time.
So what's a 60-day thing? So
the second meeting in March.
Look up a date on that.
What's the second meeting March date? Second meeting March.
When's the closest meeting to 60 days?
We have a Tuesday date in March. Tuesday the 26th of March. That's your first Tuesday meeting night.
That's not 60 days.
Oh.
I would say April 8th.
That's budget night.
I'm sorry?
That's the introduction of the mayor's budget night, the April 8th.
April 22nd, do we have a meeting that day? It's Easter Monday.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's not a holiday for us.
We do have a meeting?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Second meeting in April?
No,
I'm sorry?
you don't have a meeting on the 22nd. It's Passover. So the next, so your choices in April are the 29th or the 8th.
Thank you, Teresa.
Your choices in March are the 26th or the 11th.
okay, April 29th, is it?
I'll clarify the
So
motion.
we're going to see Lisa, we're going to see Alice in the next 30 days on the school. It's about coordinating when everybody can go to that school and what your schedules are. I can tell you it has been, Alice and Lisa Rodovian are busy in their first terms here, so I haven't lent on them as much, and I will lean on them because this is obviously very urgent for everybody. So we all want to get to the bottom of it. I would like Teresa to talk to about the capacity that the schools are at in the annual report.
Well, can we speak to the motion first? What is the motion and is there a second?
The motion is to postpone until April 29th.
And the reason for that projected period, and was there a second?
I'd like to give a reason if I may.
Sure, yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry,
She needs a second.
after the second?
Did you second
You have to
it?
have a second.
I did.
Okay, so now I gave, thanks. From, I'm actually gearing this towards my colleague Alderman Savage, who I drive crazy with my, my indecisions here, but from reading this past weekend's headlines, 1 in 3 Anne Arundel County schools is expected to meet or exceed state-rated capacity in 2020, according to a school utilization chart approved by the County Council on Monday, end quote. This should be a no-brainer piece of legislation to support in that it addresses school capacity in the development rule. As reported, we have crowded schools or, quote, inadequate facilities, end quote, decreased teacher-to-student ratios, fewer resources for students, and greater reliability on portable classrooms. Therefore, one would question if the county has failed in managing their respective adequate facility statutes and/or development waivers and/or fees as they apply to school construction. Adequate facilities is meant to be a concurrency law. The idea of concurrency in the context of growth essentially means what the name suggests, that growth, rather than outpacing the ability of surrounding infrastructure to handle it, should happen simultaneously with the required upgrades to roads and schools. It's a proactive rather than reactive model that, through careful demographic and population studies, sets minimum benchmarks known as level of service standards that must be met before certain stages of the development can go forward. Adequate facilities ordinance is not meant to enable towns to enact a moratorium on building. It instead provides for a system of impact fees and infrastructure donations that the developers can contribute in order to be granted preliminary approval of their project. Any fees collected or land received would be put toward the construction of the necessary facilities in due time. From my research, I believe that adequate facilities cannot sustain as the preferred growth planning tool if public officials and governing bodies in the city and in the county continue to apply them in a different way. Perhaps a solution is to remove developer waivers and/or fee in lieu of and require construction of said facilities concurrent with the underlying project. This is a responsibility that should be shared between the city and the county, since we all stand to potentially benefit from construction of the new schools and roads, whether in the form of having updated and larger facilities, safer and better designed roads, or shorter travel time. If not, the end result is that rather than promote or manage growth, the unbalanced implementation of the statute may drive up property values and taxes and inevitably incentivize developers, residential developers, to take their projects elsewhere where costs will be lower. That's not smart growth in the true definition. I sincerely ask that we postpone until we have a commitment from the county on getting back to a concurrency law. I believe we can get that commitment from the county with future dialogue. Thank you.
Alderman Arnett.
So just to remind you the history, because this legislation has been around for a year, and we keep postponing, but nobody really can tell me why we're postponing. The arguments you gave, Mayor, were not for postponing, it was for voting down the legislation. If that's what we want to do, we don't need to postpone, we can vote it down. But there's this continually staving it off with no real discussion about what it is that we're going to achieve through postponement, I find just a little bit irritating and certainly quite frustrating. This is not a new ordinance. People have had plenty of time to generate information and find facts, and so to come to these meetings where there's to be a vote, and then all of a sudden remember or find out that you need more information unspecified, and it's not even clear how long we're going to take, and when will we ever get the needed information. If there was something concrete that you could tell me that we're getting from talking to Alice and Lisa, maybe we could consider that, but we're not even hearing that. And every one of the 3 points that you made are points against having inadequate public facilities for students. And I can only conclude that it's more important to have this nebulous concept of development to bring in young people than it is to have our schools uncrowded. And that's not my priority. So I would argue that we not postpone this. We've postponed it often enough. I cannot figure out what new information it is that you're going to get that you don't have now. It seems your mind is set against that. That's fine. There's 8, 9 people on the council, and we often don't agree. But this continuing to delay when it sounds like what you really want is to vote no is just, it's frustrating. So I would urge that we not delay.
I would say the way it's written, Ross, that it means that we're going to be a city full of $1 million houses and assisted livings. That's the way I'd say it's written.
Just like the counties.
It's not written like the counties.
The county has an adequate public facility, has had it for a long time. Why is it that they can have it and need it and use it, and we don't need it for our children? The point is to make sure that we don't overdevelop and we don't overcrowd the schools, and the point is to be consistent with the county. The initial legislation has a ludicrous 120% for high school. Other than that, we're really in line with the county. So that's what this is really about, is to bring our high school capacity down to a level that has some meaning and some possibility of preventing overcrowding. All of these other things that you're talking about, goals for having young people living in dense mixed-use development, those are all laudable goals, but they're independent of. And for you to just assert that this is going to stop that from happening, I'd say no, let's do good planning. That's how you get the development to bring in young people and the development that is going to satisfy them. But by the way, young people who have families aren't going to come here to overcrowded schools. They're not going to come here to schools that are not up to snuff when they can go to Howard County or Montgomery County and go to the schools there. So I think we should be looking to those things in terms of attracting young people and high-tech people rather than trying to keep this door open for development. And I think we should be looking to the comp plan and planning devices to figure out how we, first of all, we need to get some consensus on this. I almost choked when you said, can we have a vision? What have I been asking for? I've been asking that the council, in a retreat, sit down and work on a shared vision. We don't need school capacity or any other APF to work on a shared vision. We need to work on a shared vision to have a shared vision. And that is independent of this legislation. It needs to be done. I've been pushing for it to be done for a long time now, and we're seemingly not going to head in that direction.
Alderman Finlayson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, every time we have this discussion, it becomes even more obvious to me just how disingenuous we're being. Anne Arundel County Public Schools were #1 in the country for many, many, many years, right up until the last 3 or 4 years, as our schools continued to become more and more overcrowded. And there wasn't a word, a peep out of this body as enrollment grew. All of our schools have been renovated, I think except one, out of the 11 schools. And not once did we give words of endorsement or encouragement when those things were at the bargaining table. Our high school is pretty well at capacity. It's a magnet school for PVA, Fine Arts Program. It's a magnet school for the International Baccalaureate Program. It's a magnet school for ESOL students, English Second Language Learners. And there's one, and then it's as a ROTC program. And kids that attend those programs, all of them, are from other areas of the county. Other schools that don't have those programs are brought into Annapolis High School, which adds to the population of Annapolis High School. We sit here and talk about Annapolis High School like it is our high school, when in actuality we share it with any number of other communities. Yet we're going to hamstring ourselves as if we have some control. The mayor has an opportunity to sit down with the county executive, with the county council representative, and the new members of the board now, to have greater discussion about our schools. It has taken Crofton well over 20 years to get a new high school. So if we're thinking we're going to force the school board to build a new school, think again. All you have to do is learn your history. It's not going to happen. I heard tonight that Alderwoman Henson is planning a tour of a charter school. So I say, we start did I misunderstand that? You're not? But I think it's a great idea, because we should start our own school. I think we should have our own charter school in the city. And then we can make these decisions, and we can also pay for it. But unless you're willing to do that, then we shouldn't impose something on ourselves that we have no control over. You know, the great divide is the chasm is getting even greater, because all of the development that is occurring are for wealthy folks that most of us in this room cannot afford. Needless to say, our teachers, our firefighters, our policemen cannot afford to live in the city. And we want to continue that. We want to perpetuate that with this kind of legislation. The message is very clear to everybody. We can pretend that it's about our kids, but we really don't care about our kids. Because if so, you would be doing something about it that's concrete and impactful. This is not how you do it. So let's not pretend any further that it's about the kids. It's not about bringing Annapolis together, because surely, again, this will increase that great divide. So, yeah, we need to continue to have this discussion, and we need to continue to have it until we get it right. If it takes 6 months, if it takes a year, if it takes 2 years, getting it right is better than doing something for the sake of doing something, or doing something to get our way, even though we know it's not the best thing for the city. So, yeah, we should postpone it. And if we can't get it done in the next 60 days, then we should postpone it again. But to pretend that we're going to be upset because nothing that we can see is happening. Like I said, it's being disingenuous, and that needs to stop. Thank you.
Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'd ask my colleagues not to postpone again. We granted, well, I don't know how many postponements we're on now, but I know the last one with, I believe, my colleague from Ward 1 and the mayor were kind of supporting the last postponement, and we did that with the understanding that some action would be taken. So really, it's in many ways, I see it as a betrayal of trust. We gave you a chance and nothing happened. Why should we believe you going forward? And I'm also, like my colleague from Ward 8 is saying, I'd like to know what else you need, my colleagues need to make up their minds. I mean, it's been how long have you tried to get this information? I'm not sure what information, like you said, Alice and the county executive will give us that you need. Many of us pledged during the campaign to pass this as written and amended. I don't take those pledges lightly. In terms of multifamily housing, I understand if there's a perception that we need more multifamily housing, and maybe we do, but I think at this point it's really anecdotal. If somebody has that data supporting that, I'd love to see it. Because what I hear in my ward, which also is anecdotal, admittedly, is that young people are more likely to move out because of schools and the quality of the schools, not because of a lack of housing choice. But also, I'm not quite clear your comment about the $1 million homes, because I don't know if this passes, I don't know how it's going to increase the amount of $1 million homes in the city or increase any kind of divide. It's pretty straightforward. All development, except for those that are specifically exempted, would have a halt for 6 years until we have capacity. It doesn't exempt $1 million homes. And in terms of some other comments that are made, yeah, perhaps in the past people didn't speak up, but they're speaking up now, right? And I think why? Because of this legislation, right? I'd argue if this passes, we'll continue to have dialogue and action. But if it dies, I'd be willing to bet the conversation is going to stop and action's not going to happen, okay? We haven't seen anything happen until this came up. So again, the mayor can sit down anytime with Delegate Kane and the county executive. That doesn't need a postponement. We should be doing that anyway. But again, I'm not quite sure it's going to happen unless this legislation is looming overhead. So I think the legislation itself would help to accomplish three things. It would help stop things from getting worse in terms of school overcrowding. It would bring us closer in line with the county. Now, I've heard it mentioned that we're not in line with the county, and we're not. The county's current legislation would be 95% for elementary, 95% for middle, and then it's 100% for high school. That's the current. When they sunset, that goes back to 95% for all three. Their current unit minimum is 5 units or greater apply. When it sunsets, it goes down to 3 units. Ours is much weaker than that. It's 105% for elementary, middle, and then it goes up to 20%, 120 for the high school. This ordinance would bring that down to 95, but again, the sponsors, co-sponsors are trying to amend that to be 100% across the board, which, granted, it doesn't match the county. It's a little weaker than the county, but at least gets us closer in line. And also, we have an amendment there that would bring us closer in line in terms of the unit minimum. So if people are asserting that this wouldn't bring us closer with the county, I'd like to hear more about why they think that's the case. The other thing that it would do is, as I've mentioned, create this incentive for addressing the issue. As Mr. Rogers said earlier, the burden for the improvements should not be on the shoulders of the taxpayers. Without this, that's going to be most likely what happens. It's going to be on the shoulders of the taxpayers. Because if the only way is if this passes, then the developers have a way to mitigate. They have to pay into a fund. All right? It says it right in our code. It says there's a mitigation option for a school facility, and this is a quote, mitigation consists of the construction or funding of improvements by a developer that increase capacity of the school facility. It goes on to say a mitigation plan with physical improvements may be secured by bond, a letter of credit, or other security acceptable to the city, and shall be provided under an agreement with the Board of Education to construct school facilities, including contract schools. So again, this doesn't stop development. I hear that a lot. What it does is slow it down until our schools have a chance to catch up. There's a 6-year waiting period. It's not all that long for development projects. Once the county makes the adjustments, the 6-year period is done and they can start building. So again, you know, many of us here made a pledge to pass this ordinance. I intend to honor that pledge I made with the public.
Teresa, oh, okay, Alderman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Henson.
I don't know, I think I may be the only parent of an Annapolis High School student that's on the council right now. I think some of us have been, but I don't get to attend the PTA meetings often because they fall on the Housing and Community Development Committee date and time. But we canceled a meeting in January, and I had the opportunity to attend the PTA meeting and to reference this at the PTA meeting with the collection of parents that were there. And there was support amongst the PTA for us having an ordinance that limits the that does exactly what this is intended to do. The parents were interested in that. When you hear the stories of parents whose children attend Annapolis High School who deal with the overcrowding is, as we've heard from many people who've testified, it's not just an issue of making sure your building is large enough, but it's making sure you have enough bathrooms. It's making sure that your cafeteria is large enough to accommodate the students. It's making sure the quality of the education with the staff to teacher ratio is well enough so that the students, Ms. Green has a student that attends at Annapolis High School as well. So there are other people in the room who have students that are at Annapolis High School. But speaking on behalf of them, I would be remiss if I didn't add that to the dialogue. If we are looking for the true value for our students there, the expressed will of the parents, as it has been expressed to me, is that we pass this amendment and that we make sure that we're doing everything we can from a city perspective to not add to the load that's there at Annapolis High School. Thanks.
Alderman Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's interesting, I find myself agreeing with everyone. It's an interesting position to be in.
Feel strongly both ways.
Both ways, yeah. I'm torn. I'm not torn about ultimately committing to supporting as a primary original sponsor of this legislation as it stands today, and I'm definitely committed to seeing it through sooner rather than later. I don't have any children, but my mother just retired as a teacher at Annapolis High, and I'm still a proud nephew of a teacher there, Miss Patty Siriano. And I'm very well aware of the issues around overcrowding and student ratio and student-teacher ratios and what that does for the quality of education and therefore the future of our communities, and so I appreciate those efforts wholeheartedly. I also am very interested in giving deference to the mayor and his team to with our support to see if we can come up with an even better way forward. And so what I just want to be very clear and transparent as, again, I'm very torn as to whether just like voting for it now or postponing, but I will say that I do ultimately, I think today we'll decide to support a postponement until a certain date. But with the high hopes and expectations and trust and confidence that we will come up with through this dialogue with our county and state representatives, an even smarter way to go forward about this. Yeah, that's where I stand.
Alderman Payon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I share the comments, share the sentiments of my colleague from Ward 5. And also my colleague from Ward 4, I think that I support the postponement. I think there's more work to be done. That should not be interpreted as as saying that I'm not going to ultimately support the legislation. I think that, you know, I agreed to support something that directly paralleled the Anne Arundel County statute as it stands now. There are some notable differences in the two, although I'll say they're fairly close. But I think what struck me tonight is the words of Ms. Finlayson, Alderwoman Finlayson, who, you know, said it may be frustrating. Matter of fact, I'm quite sure it's frustrating to the sponsors, and maybe even to some of the opponents to postpone this vote tonight. But, you know, we have to get it right, or at least as close to right as we can get it. I don't think it involves major changes. I mean, there are one or two that I'd like to see. Again, I mean, I hope my colleague from Ward 8 doesn't think I'm giving reasons for voting against this thing, but I think the changes I have in mind are things that I think we can work out, and I'd rather do that before I take a vote. And therefore, I support the postponement, but again, it doesn't mean I'm ultimately not going to vote in favor of the legislation. I just want to do everything, be able to say I did everything I could to make sure that this is absolutely correct. Thank you.
Alderman Annette.
So I guess, first of all, I would look forward to my colleague from Ward 2 to bring forth to somebody these changes that you would like to have. And I would like to hear, you're asking for a postponement. I would really like to hear from you, Mayor, what it is that you expect to achieve in a meeting with Lisa and Alice that is going to bring bearing on this legislation. Are they going to convince you that it should be 97%, not 95? Everything you said in your introductory remarks lead me to believe that you don't want this legislation. So if you're going to get these meetings, which were promised after the last postponement, what is it that you think you're going to be bringing back to bring more light on this legislation? What will be the topics?
So first of all, can we have Teresa read into the record what the current capacities of the school are now? So we know that the high school is the issue, right? We know that as soon as we pass this legislation, we are shut down. And that we know that the only thing that can get a permit after that is going to be single-family homes and assisted livings. I don't want to live in a city full of million-dollar homes and assisted livings. I want a variety, and I know we can get there if we work with the county, because it's not apples to apples. The county has 4 high schools. The county has a sunset clause. The county has exclusionary zones. We need to work some of that out. I understand what you're trying to achieve. Everybody on Forest Drive has had enough of the traffic. So let's make sure that we take care of that. But there are other areas in the city that we should try to incentivize development. And when we talk about public housing, we should be able to get creative on public housing and adding some different, more creative ways on how we approach that. I don't want to shut the door on that. I don't want to shut the door on infill. I don't want to shut the door on the opportunity for us to, when we talk about sea level rise, when we talk about how we're going to engage the private sector in helping us meet our sea level goals, we know we're going to have some type of incentive for them to invest in the things that we need to give us the infrastructure that we talk about. That's an option, and some of that component is going to be multifamily housing. So there are a plethora of things, but Teresa, could you please
could you answer my question, though? All of those are reasons to vote against this legislation. Tell me what it is that by postponing, you're going to find that will speak to this legislation, not speak to your development plans, but speak to this legislation, which is changing the parameters for the capacity from 120% to some lower number. Right now it's 95, the amendment says 100. I'm still at a loss as to what Lisa or Alice are going to tell you that you're going to come back to us on April or January of next year, whenever we get around to this, and say, I've seen the light. This is something that
It's just what I
speaks to
said,
this.
Ross.
I mean, vote no if you want to vote no against this legislation, but if you're going to postpone it, at least give us a clue as to what it is you expect to bring back to the table to help us think about the legislation.
I just gave you a lot of things that we
Those
need
are all
to talk
things
about.
to not pass
And they are
this.
talking about exclusions of some areas. So if it's Forest Drive or what you need to achieve, we can do that, but let's not cut the whole city off.
So the 100% is fine, but you want to exclude some areas. Isn't that a planning item, something we do in the comprehensive plan and with the planning
That'll be taken out of the
department?
equation if we
And
vote
those
on
can
this.
always be done at some point. If we wanted to do Overton Town Center as an exemption, those can always be done.
Teresa?
So you would like to know the enrollment and capacity at Annapolis High School? Or all of the Annapolis schools? What would?
Yes, please.
Okay. So Annapolis High School has a current capacity of 2,086 students. The projected enrollment for September of 2019 is 2,099 students, so it's projected to be over capacity this September. I have Jody looking to see if they have the actual for last September. It'll be over by 13, that's correct. And then it goes up to 2,128, 2,119, 2,168. It continues to go up, peaks in 2026 at 2,291, declines slightly to 2,279. So Annapolis High, using a 100% capacity criteria, is over capacity, projected to be in September of this year. If you go to a 95%, it's already in excess of 95%. So because Annapolis High would be closed on the school utilization chart, all development that feeds into Annapolis High would be stopped for 6 years. Annapolis Middle School capacities 1,495. They hit a peak of 1,000 in 2022, so they're nowhere near capacity. Bates Middle School has a capacity of 1,030, and they peak at 770 in 2025, so they're nowhere near capacity. Annapolis Elementary has a capacity of 314, and they peak at 250 in 2027. Eastport has a capacity of 336. They peak at 317 in 2027. Georgetown East has a capacity of 597. They are nowhere near that in any year. They peak at 334 in 2027. Germantown has a capacity of 718. They are nowhere near capacity. They peak at 557 in 2027. Hillsmere has a state-rated capacity of 509. Again, nowhere near capacity. They hit 308 in 2027. Mills Parole is the only school that is near capacity. Its state-rated capacity is 696. They go anywhere from 657 up to a peak in 2021 of 698. So that's two students more than the state-rated capacity, and then it goes down from there. Rolling Knolls has a capacity of 607. Again, they're not anywhere near that capacity. They reach 490 in 2027. Tyler Heights, with the improvements that are already being built or programmed, has a capacity of 549. Enrollment peaks at 435 in September and goes down from there. West Annapolis has a capacity of 340, and their enrollment peaks at 257 in 2021 and goes down from there. So the only school that is at 95 or 100 and above is Annapolis High School, with the exception of parole in 1 year by 2 students.
I think I'm trying to make the point that this is all about the high school, and I really believe we can fix it if we get together with our county counterparts. So Alderwoman Finlayson.
Part of the discussion that could be had, Mr. Mayor, is programmatic. As I mentioned previously, there are 4 different programs outside of the normal instructional day at Annapolis High School. Annapolis High School was renovated several years ago to add a whole new wing for PVA, the arts program. The school board, the superintendent, with encouragement from the county council members maybe, could take out any one of those programs and put it someplace else. Okay? Because they've already renovated all the elementary schools, and that's why there's capacity. Okay? So they're not going to have to come back and do that anymore. It's the high school. So maybe the discussion could be about additional capacity for the high school and how that's met. You know, maybe it be limited to Annapolis residents. I mean, it's Annapolis High School. I mean, there's all kinds of discussions that could be had when you sit down with the other elected leaders to come up with a solution. And one other thing I want to add on a different note, as we go through, and I hope we have an opportunity to really do a comparison of how the county does business and how we do business. Because the county's procedures are very different as far as accepting certificates of, whatever the term is, of adequacy. Because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, the developers get to say when they want it, and in the county, they get it up front. And we've held it off until the very end. So let's make the developers, the residents, work through the whole process, and then at the end, we say, oh, and by the way, our schools are at capacity, and so you can't move forward. It's a fairness issue. It's a business issue. So just keep that in mind as we're looking to fix this problem that we seem to have. There's something else bigger that needs to be fixed.
Alderwoman Pindell-Charles.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Savage.
Ms. Sutherland, what are the numbers for Monarch Academy?
They are not in the educational facility master plan for the Annapolis feeder system, maybe because they're not a county school. They're not a school that is owned by the Anne Arundel County Public School System. They are a school that is funded by the Anne Arundel County School System.
Right, but they're also taking students from all the other elementary schools in the area.
Right.
Which makes kind of strange
Well,
sense.
so you might have, if you're looking at enrollment versus capacity for those other elementary schools, and you didn't have Monarch, maybe those other elementary schools would have more students.
Absolutely.
Right? But you're still within the Annapolis feeder system. The Parole is the only one that's even close to capacity.
Right. I was just curious as to what,
No,
I'm surprised
it's not in there.
Monarch's not.
But when those kids finish at Monarch and they go to Bates or Annapolis Middle or they go to Annapolis High School,
That's where
that
they're
is in
going.
there.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Alderman Savage, just want to let you know my kid's going to Annapolis High next year.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do hear your concerns, but what exactly are you suggesting for changing this ordinance to address your concerns? I mean, are you hoping that Councilwoman Rodvian and Delegate Kane are going to give you these amendments? As a colleague from Ward A said, you can add in, you can change this, right? We can change it in the future. But we don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, if I got that saying right. We can always change things, always. I mean, I gave you one possible carve-out, but you didn't even want to introduce it. So what other carve-outs do you want? What changes do you want? At least if this passes, I'll assume that you'll be working on these amendments because you do want to get things opened up again and changed. So if we postpone this, we are essentially postponing our children's well-being. Again, we don't want to let perfect be the enemy of the good in this case, and the good is protecting our children. So, and you're in effect saying no to the pledge that you made, and a couple of us made in writing, signed during the campaign, because that's exactly what got introduced. Exactly. Well, except for the unit minimum, but more or less. So you're essentially saying no. You want to rip that up, because that's what you're saying at this point. And I think we should make that known in public, that that's what's you're saying.
I'm saying that I don't want to pull the drawbridge up like you, right? Alderman Tierney.
I've learned a lot since I said no to, and it doesn't mean that I'm not going to support this legislation, but if I were Gavin, I believe in it, and maybe not anyone else believes this, but I believe that the county is in the driver's seat as far as our school system. And in a perfect world, I would say to the county, I'm not really convinced that what you've done has been that great. I'm not sure if your adequate facilities legislation is the best in your prior administration. There's new administration, there's new council, et cetera. Can you look at your adequate facilities legislation and tell us where it works and where it doesn't? Because right now, we have a crowded high school, and we're going to stop development for 6 years because this one high school is overcrowded, and you haven't done anything. And no one's heard me for the last 3 minutes. So in a perfect world, what would be ideal is if Gavin has that conversation, they sit down, again, they are in the driver's seat as far as the quality and the quantity of our school system. And if they have an adequate facilities legislation that serves a good purpose and gets us a better high school, then we simply rip this up and write a simple ordinance that says, per, I don't know, you help me with this one, Rich, but per da-da-da-da-da, this is what our adequate facilities for schools is, per county code, da-da-da-da-da. And then we don't go down that path of waivers and then carve-outs and deciding who should, what, it's a slippery slope, and I just think that we've already gone down too far. So that would be my recommendation, Mayor, is have them do their homework and write a good adequate facilities legislation so that we get a better high school and not stop development for 6 years with nothing to gain from it.
I think we could vote, all those in favour of the Tierney postponement, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Abstain. Work for Anne Arundel County Public Schools.
Roll call.
Mayor Buckley.
Aye.
Alderman Arnett.
No.
Alderman Tierney.
Aye.
Alderman Payon.
Aye.
Alderman Pendle Charles.
Abstain.
Okay. Alderman Finlayson.
Aye.
Alderman Rodriguez.
Aye.
Alderman Henson.
No.
Alderman Savage.
No.
The motion is carried.
All right, guys are getting to McGarvey's a little bit earlier. I promise you, I'm going to work hard on this. Right? Oh, come on.
I gave you a script.
30 days is like... Okay, Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is Resolution R-2-19, 2019 St. Patrick's Day Parade, waiver of fees, for the purpose of identifying the St. Patrick's Day Parade special event that will be held on March 10, 2019, and waiving certain related city of fees for that event.
Is there a motion to adopt R-2-19 on second reader? Motion. Are you ready? A motion to adopt R-2-19 on second reader?
So moved.
Seconded. Okay. Discussion. Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we've learned in the Finance Committee, and we learned last budget, we waive an incredible number of fees. I think none of us realized how many fees we waived. And when we take these up one at a time, every time we do it, we say, we're going to have to go back and revisit our policy for waiving fees. We've not done that. We still need to do that. As I look at this sheet that was submitted in support of this waiver of fees, I see a lot of talk about how it brings business into town. That's nice, but I'm not sure that that's a city function. It talks about generating dining out. Again, very nice. I'm happy to hear that. But should the taxpayers be supporting that ability for those people to come and dine out? It says it supports 14 organizations. I don't know how they do it or to what extent they do it, but it also says it only supports one directly, which is the Wounded Warriors. And again, we have no information on how that's done. This has morphed from being a parade now to an event. The bands, I assume, are going to be performing at an event down on City Dock. All of these things are nice. And certainly there is a strong tradition in this country of celebrating St. Patrick's Day. There's an even stronger one in my family since my mother is 100% Irish. But is this something the city should be waiving fees for? And we don't even really know. We have an indication of what has been waived in the past. It looks like we're waiving somewhere in the magnitude of $7,000 or more dollars. We don't really know. So it's not even clear to me what it is we're waiving. We won't know until after the fact what it is we've waived. I would argue that if this is a good event and it has so much support, we ought to give it applause and say thank you, but we ought not to give it taxpayer dollars. And I think that this is only one of many events that we need to go back and evaluate in the same light. We don't do that. We don't seem to have a plan, or at least there's two different competing plans for going back to do that, but we never do get around to it. So I would resist very strongly the city adding this to the list of events for which, well, not add, continue to waive fees for this, as much fun and as worthy as this is. And I think we ought to be thinking about how many more. I mean, there's lots of other people that can bring really neat, fun things, make Annapolis a really cool city, and are we going to continue to waive fee after fee after fee? These are largely overtime dollars for public safety people, and they are being paid for by the taxpayers. And I think we need to start drawing a line in the sand. For me, this is where I'm drawing my line.
Comment on that? Do you want to? I'm sorry, Alderman Pound, sorry.
I wish I had his money, Mr. Mayor.
They get to decide,
actually, Mr. Mayor, I'm 1,024th Irish, I found out. Spoken like a good Republican. Mr. Mayor, I unfortunately was buttonholed by one of my colleagues when you first started this discussion, and I was going to move at the very beginning that we continue this matter to a date certain. I've got several reasons for that. I did speak with Mr. O'Leary today, who couldn't be here this evening. He's on business in San Diego. However, he has been in touch with me about this. He has proposed that we put together an economic study of some kind after this year's event. I mean, you know, they haven't gotten a bill. They pay their bills. I'm confident that whenever, if this particular ordinance or resolution fails, I'm confident that they'll be able to pay or make some sort of arrangements to pay whatever it is they're charged. I have to tell you, I think I have the votes tonight, but I'm not completely sure. And I think that I like the idea of seeing, actually measuring the economic impact this has. I mean, it's not so much about the economic impact. Anybody that has been in this parade, what it's really about is the looks on the faces of children as you go through the parade, as they hear the bagpipes playing and the Irish dancers and that sort of thing, the family get-togethers. It brings so much more than, I could ever put in, down on paper. I think one of my colleagues had indicated that she would like somebody here to answer some pretty direct questions, and I expected some people here this evening, but...
Got Brendan here if you want to speak. Yeah.
Well, I don't...
Brendan could speak to some of the economic impact if you want, no?
I had in mind specific dollars and cents.
Okay.
I mean, 300 hotel rooms at $4,000 in taxes and hotel taxes, but these are only the ones that the group made arrangements for.
Great. Bands from all over the East Coast. We focus mostly on fire departments, police departments, and veterans. And all of those, we pay for them all to stay in hotels here. It's a big city parade in a small town. It's amazing.
If I'm going to be spoken over, can you at least say your name and your address?
Oh, sorry. Sorry. My name is Brendan Fisher. I live at 3051 Ronderlac Road, and I've been blessed to keep the doors open at Armadillo's for the past 19 years. And I've worked with Naptown events, Warrior events, and we've done a lot of good things. We've raised money for CASA, autism, Warrior events, Wounded Warrior Project, Yellow Ribbon Fund, and I'm not talking hundreds of dollars, I'm talking thousands of dollars. And this parade is amazing. If you folks have been there, and once in a while I want to thank you all. I love living in this town. And I know that you guys all too, or you wouldn't be here because this does not seem like fun. Okay? And I couldn't say from my heart how much this parade does for the city, and it's only going to get bigger. We're known up the East Coast, the whole coast now, for this parade. Right. Philadelphia, New York, Boston. We have DC, Prince George's, Anne Arundel, all the counties are involved in it. I'll tell you, I wrote a check for almost what you guys are charging him myself. That's how involved we are.
Sorry, Fred, I thought he was with you. Well, everyone knows you. I thought everyone knows you, Brendan.
I'm sorry.
Actually, I've met Brendan. I apologize for not recognizing you.
That's okay. It's good you guys don't know me. That means I'm keeping a low profile. I'm not getting in trouble.
Mr. Mayor, my motion still stands. I think that, if it's dollars and cents we're after, then, I mean, answers in dollars and cents. I'm not sure that Brendan can provide that tonight, understandably so. And this is after speaking to the big boss, Mr. O'Leary, that we have, given city council citations to the last 2 years for his efforts in this regard. I respect that, and I think that it'd be appropriate to continue the matters. He's assured me, as I said, that the bills will get paid even if this doesn't pass somehow, and this will allow a little bit more time. I wasn't aware till I saw the agenda that this was going to be put back in quite this quickly. So if I might add, I might think about asking you to send it to a committee or two in the meantime, just to get some more information about the parade.
Can I say one more thing?
Well, you have a motion and a second on it as it stands, right? Alderman Tierney? Yeah.
I just have a point of clarification. This is to waive fees. This is not, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is not to call it a city-sponsored event, which is a separate issue altogether.
Correct. It's simply to waive the fees for this year's parade.
To waive the fees, which can be done by resolution. Teresa?
Yes, if this resolution passes before Alderwoman Henson's ordinance comes up for a vote, and you waive the fees, it is by definition a city-sponsored special event.
Okay.
Alderwoman Henson?
I would,
She got a second, yeah.
of postponing, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, I once asked to postpone a lease so that I could get more information from the harbor master, and my colleague from Ward 2 scolded me about postponing that lease and the impropriety of doing that with the public being hamstrung until another meeting with my tardiness in asking my questions. But I would ask my question of the city manager or the finance director. In looking at the fiscal impact, it looks like the fees go up by $1,000 or so every year. It was $4,300, then $5,100, then $67, then $72. What accounts for the increase in fees every year?
I'm sorry, we would have to go back and look at the details of it, but the parade has grown. It's growing each year. And the costs for our police and fire go up every year as well.
I think too, and I'm not speaking for Alderman Arnett, but it would help my understanding if the staff report included, at one point we had access to, I think it was a spreadsheet that said what events we waived fees for, and it kind of gave us a subtotal of what the amount of fees, because it was some speculation on we were waiving fees all the time or we were doing it only specially and cherry picking, and you kind of boiled it down for us on this is exactly when you have waived fees and this is exactly how much. If we have to approach the topic of waiving fees, I know it would help inform my decision-making to know what types of events we've waived them for and what the dollar amount that represents as well.
We can provide that to you. We provided that to the Finance Committee at their last meeting.
On this topic specifically or just in general?
They just had on their agenda fee waivers, not this one specifically.
Thank you.
So we need a second for the postponement. You're on the floor for a postponement. Fred, anyone want to?
I'll second it. I thought I had already seconded it.
Because he said until a date certain, we need a date.
Ask the sponsor.
You want to come again, don't you, Brendan?
Thank you.
29th of April, she's saying.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Any discussion? Because I'm going to vote on this.
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
We're looking forward to downtown becoming more than a parking lot, and we think that part of it would have a great parade on St. Patrick's Day.
Is the NYPD coming?
Sorry?
Is the NYPD coming?
Yes, they are.
Oh, that's awesome.
And the DC
And the
one's
fire
not
department.
on. So, why is DC cancelled?
Well, it depends on when they're coming, because their parade was canceled because of the government shutdown, so I'm pretty sure they're coming this year.
All right. All those in favor of the postponement say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
I'm gonna go no as well. Okay.
Gotcha.
Can I say no as well?
I'll talk to you later. No, right, you're right.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda. Yep.
Okay. The agenda is completed.
Is there anything else for good order?
I move that we adjourn.
All right, all those in favor of Fred's adjournment, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right.